So tonight, this is titled Planning for the Future. I'm going to tell you about, since I've been here, what kind of roadblocks we've run into, what we're doing now, and what we plan on doing in the future. And a lot of this is going to revolve around the stresses that we're feeling due to climate change. And I know, for many, many years as horticulturists, as plantsmen, we've pushed the boundaries on plant zones. We've tried to grow what we can't grow, just to say we could, just to collect. And we've done that for years, but the difference is now we're doing it because we have to do it. And that's the point that I'm going to try to stress the most this evening. So I teach woody plants at Farmingdale. I'm an adjunct, and I mostly lean on Jonathan Lair's presentations. And Jonathan, I don't know if he coined the term, but he talks a lot about zone creep. And as you can see from this map, the colors alone describe, the changes that we've seen in those years. This is a little bit more specified. And then you could see from the Arbor Day hardiness zone map. And it's obvious what we're seeking more these days is heat hardiness rather than cold hardiness. So zone creep, the physiological hardiness, cold and heat, is the greatest determination of plants' survival. As the temperatures change, plants must face the consequences. What are the consequences? We're losing northern boreal plants as viable options. It's too hot. And these are some good examples. 2 years ago, we do a lot of business with Bob Schleck Nursery. He grows a lot of, he grafts for us. We do a lot of work with him, but I was looking for a replacement for a Picea pungens, something blue. We needed something blue in our Four Seasons border. We needed a blue conifer, and he had a number of different pungens out there, but he refused to sell them to me. I went somewhere else and I bought it. But he was obvious. The message was like Bayard should not be planting, these trees going into the future, and we needed it for design purposes. It's still alive, but we're making those tough decisions now, and there's so many plants that have been removed from our plant palette. There's a grower out east who is kind of thinning out his collection, and he offered these beautiful Montgomery pungens in different shapes, really sculptural, like 8 by 8, beautiful plants. And I have a million different places that I could use them, but we're not going to accept them because we know they really don't have a future here. These are just some examples. Like I said earlier, for years we've grown things because we could. We've tried to push the limit, but now tonight we're going to be talking more about growing certain species because we have to. So in 2014, Ken Drews wrote The New Shade Garden, and the whole concept of this book was the shade garden is the new garden for climate change. So I'm going to be talking a lot about trees and restoring canopies. And that's where it all starts. If we don't do that, how are we going to protect what's below it? Okay, so provenance matters. Assisted migration. So choosing plants from the northernmost of southern provenances in anticipation of the changing climate. This idea was first, we have been doing it for years, not necessarily consciously, but it was first introduced to us by the International Oak Society. Excuse me. This is my second night of speaking at plant organizations, and so this idea was first thrown out by this guy Steve Roche from the International Oak Society. He was seeking, he wanted cuttings from us, conifer cuttings, and he wanted to swap for acorns. And it started this whole thing with Bayard Cutting Arboretum and the growth of our oak collection. But he started really, he's the seed collector for the society, and he started introducing us to all of these southern gardens, universities, and different horticulturists that were sending us acorns. And this goes to pretty much as part of our actually master plan for horticulture, our criteria for introducing plants. As you guys all know, this is a historical garden, so historical significance is considered. We consider the biodiversity, increasing the biodiversity of collections in natural areas. We consider the relevance to particular collections or natural areas. We consider the ecological purpose. We consider practical value, erosion control, weed suppression, and of course we consider natural beauty of the arboretum. But now, more so than ever, a primary consideration is the ability of a plant's survival during these changing cultural conditions going into the future. So why oaks? Oaks are, Joy's heard me say this a million times, oaks are the most important genus on the planet. They are a keystone species. They are foundational to the functioning of forests. And I was talking earlier about canopies, and the oak trees play such an essential place to the ecology of so much different wildlife. Ecologically, the genus supports more ecosystems and wildlife than any other. Out of the close to 500 species of oaks, there are close to 100 that are native to North America. And caterpillars alone, they support almost 900 species. So oak conservation. Not only are oaks one of the most important genera, they're one of the most threatened. So 22% of the American oak species that I was speaking about are threatened. The diversity of Oak Park and the oak collection at Bayard Cutting Arboretum has been documented, and concerning conservation, the data is published in the Oak Red Book, and it's shared with arboreta throughout the world to further conservation efforts. Oaks as well, they're an evolutionary success story concerning the genetic diversity. The widespread distribution makes them the perfect candidate for assisted migration. So a little bit about Oak Park. Oak Park is, we have oaks throughout the Arboretum, obviously, but Oak Park is really where our oak collection is. That's where you'll find the most diversity. And I handed out this, Joy actually put this together about a year ago, and it talks about our collection, but I'll just read it quickly. Bayard Cutting Arboretum has a vast amount of oaks in both cultivated and natural areas. Oak Park is our 10-acre oak collection. It was designed utilizing plans conceived by Frederick Law Olmsted in 1887. Some of the original black oaks still stand in this area, and we wish to preserve the historic integrity of this collection by making the necessary horticultural adaptations. The collection contains 39 species of oak. Vinny's helping us on that one. We're going to try to reach 40 pretty soon. And just under 200 specimens. While Quercus coccinea and Quercus valentina are the most prevalent, making up half the collection, new species and cultivars are continually being introduced. In addition to the species native to this area, we are trying some from further afield and of uncertain hardiness here, such as Quercus chrysolepsis and Quercus virginiana. We have also been growing oaks from southern provenances that will withstand climate change stress. The natural areas of the Arboretum possess many of the native oaks of the northeastern United States. This was the statement of intent that we published for a grant with the International Oak Society, and it's a pretty good description of what we're trying to do. But I always, you know, there are black oaks in Oak Park that do predate the construction of the Manor House, which is 1886. So it's pretty amazing to think that was Frederick Law Olmsted's first design. He was brought in to lay out the roads and the pathways, but that was the first thing that he saw. And he, some of the oaks that stand there today were what inspired him. So, quick summary of the oak collection: 52 mapped oaks, 198 oaks, 39 species, we went over that, 11 cultivars, and our largest black oak is 60 inches in diameter at breast height. That is the black oak on the Great Lawn, right, Joy?
Yes.
There are a couple of really big ones, and we're doing everything we can to preserve them. The LIAA we were just discussing is doing their Day of Service, Arbor Day here, and we have a real vigorous day planned, and we participated last year when they were at Vanderbilt, and it was just amazing to see what they did. So we're really hoping to pay a lot of attention to Oak Park. Our collection goals: continued expansion of our diversity, aggressive planting of native oaks in natural areas, this including something that we're working on with Cornell, with Mina and her biochar experiments, as far as introduce into our natural areas where we really can't maintain new introductions. We usually plant small and plant by bare root. To increase our survival rate, we've had a couple of different biochar trials going on. I don't need to say anything for this, they speak for themselves. And that brings us to our propagation program. Now, I know you're all nursery men and women, and I don't want to embarrass ourselves by our rudimentary propagation. But when it comes to oaks, they're pretty easy, as we all know, to propagate. And that's one of the reasons that we got into this. Like I said, we get oaks sent to us. Like every year, we get pounds of oaks, of acorns sent to us from all over the world. I know Kristen; she's our office administrator. She, she doesn't look forward to going to the post office at certain times of year. That's a great picture I love to include. It's the next director of Bayard Cutting Arboretum. Her name is Rose Cost, and she's the daughter of Heather, who curates Breezy Island, but she is an oak enthusiast. So these are all 3-year-old plants that we introduced to Oak Park, and these are all standing. And you know, we keep track of everything pretty diligently. Joy, before becoming the landscape curator, she was our GIS specialist, and she still is very active in that role. But you know, we do record everything pretty closely as far as what survives and what doesn't. A lot of our failures, I can tell you, are based on provenance. And like Quercus virginiana, the ones that we germinated, like Mark and Vinny were probably there at Hortus a couple of years ago. We brought in tons of acorns of Quercus virginiana, and we germinated a lot of it, and they were all from different areas. And the provenance really did matter. The northernmost ones were the ones that still stand in Oak Park. That's our largest and oldest black oak. Now, I'm still talking about the goals of our collection. One thing going into the future are conservation groves. So we want to put together conservation groves focused on the most threatened species that we're able to grow here. And a conservation grove is simply one threatened species from as many different areas as possible planted in one immediate area. And it's mainly to, you know, to help ensure the success of that species and encourage crossbreeding. This is Quercus acerfolia, the maple leaf oak, which I think we put out a call for more of them this year, but we just have them from one source right now, right, Joy?
Yes.
Yep. But this is a very important oak that is in the Red Book of Oaks, and we want to help preserve it. Okay, so those were our goals. Now I'll talk a little bit about what we've had success with and what we haven't. So with oak selection, with our upcoming visitor center and parking lot project, where we are planting a lot of oaks, and they're you know, tough urban kind of conditions, a parking lot. So our criteria is generally heat tolerance, drought tolerance, flooding tolerance, tolerant of compacted soils, urban conditions, and disease resistance. Now, most of the most of the species that we're focusing on are all bottomland species in the wild. Broad floodplains, swamps, prone to flooding and drought. That pretty much everything that we've chosen. I'm going to pass this around. These are my Bibles of oaks. This is the newest Durr book, and it focuses more so on cultivars. And a lot of the cultivars I'm going to be talking about are all featured in that book. And that is a U.S. forestry publication. And I find that with straight species, the U.S. forestry has the most accurate information. When we're trying to determine provenance and ranges of certain oaks, that's the book I always go to. And they really have a great website as well, where you can do species You can look it up. If you Google U.S. forestry oaks, it'll bring you to the website, and you can actually do species profiles, and they break down every species of oak according to what I've been discussing. Okay, so Quercus lorata, extremely tough and urban tolerant, thrives in heat, tolerant of the extremes of drought and compacted soils, and actually enjoys periodic flooding or waterlogged conditions. So we're a big fan right now of marquee because of its symmetrical upright habit. But one of the oaks that we've chosen in volume for our parking lot project is Green Spring. And we chose that mostly for its compact, rounded habit. Natalii, vigorous, heat tolerant, native to states bordering the Mississippi Valley. Also, as you probably know, it's a bottomland species. Ruby Spring is a favorite of ours because of its great fall color, and it does drop all its leaves at once at the same time. Very, very clean. Muhlenbergii, it's a favorite of Vinnie Simeone. The Chinkapin oak, also a bottomland species, but a broader native range. From like the Great Lakes, probably down to Texas. And there, to my knowledge, there's been no commercial breeding of Muhlenbergii. Vinny?
No,
Yeah, but it's definitely,
under the radar.
it's something that should be on the radar for the future. And I think one of the great things about all of these bottomland species that we've discussed, they're nursery compatible. Like they transplant. There's uniform habits. There's a lot of them. They've proved at this point they can be grafted. I know Nina Bassick at Cornell did a lot of research in the world of grafting oaks, and was very, very successful. And I think a lot of what we see today is probably based on that. And the bicolors, of course. We all know swamp white oaks. Hopefully we all love them. But it's become like a really, really useful, urban, shade tree, a street tree. Wherever you go, like in New York City, you'll see them, planted. We really like Sunbreaker, and that's going to be one of the showcase bicolors in our parking lot, and we've largely chose that because of its exfoliating bark. Very, very attractive. Dark, glossy leaves, uniform. And of course, Quercus velos. So proven shade tree and street tree, adaptable, durable. Kingpin is what we're going to be planting in our parking lot. It's a favorite because darker foliage, which is interesting. It really is compared to the species. It really has a darker and really, I mean, when you see it compared to the species, you really, really notice it. It's a darker foliage and a very strong central leader as compared to the straight species. So, beyond oak trees. So, the coastline is one of our most recognizable places at Bayard Cutting Arboretum. It's cherished, but it's also one of the most vulnerable places right now. So my entire professional life, I've worked in coastal gardens, I started off at the Cloisters, although it's up on a hill. It's still a coastal garden. I worked at Longhouse Reserve, and then before coming to Bayard, I worked at Randall's Island Park Alliance, and the awareness and the evidence of climate change in that period of time has become so evident to me. When I was at Randall's Island, we were part of, post-Sandy, we were part of a coastal garden alliance, or a coastal island, a coastal garden like organization that really, we all recorded our data and we compared it and whatnot. And it was when I first really recognized the impact of it. And at Bayard, over the past 6 years, I've really seen, as I'm sure all of you that visit, I've really seen incredible changes. Salinity levels, the flooding. There are so many things that we could even grow 6 years ago that we can't grow right now. And that's amazing to see that over that short period of time. So our greatest threat coastally is largely rising temperatures, rising sea level, and increased salinity. That's me. Nelson was very upset when he saw this photo because I had the Kubota and salt water. We had to rescue plants. We were setting up a planting on Breezy Island, and we didn't get everything completed. And then the tide rose, and the next day they were like, you know, we were running after plants, swimming after plants.
Oh, no.
So what is the solution? You know, we've been running in different directions. We've rebuilt the bulkheads. You know, we have 2 miles of coastline. So we've tried different things. Riprap, we've really, what is the solution? You know, and the very different approaches to this. You know, the historians want to protect, you know, the shoreline. We have the 3 ponds that we have were all designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. We have the sketches of them. They're very, very important. But most of the ecologists we speak to, they want us to go to a natural shoreline. So what is the solution? Perhaps a little bit of both. So one thing that we have been doing, I mean, I guess I sounded pretty ambiguous in that last statement, but the one thing we have been doing is adjusting all of our horticulture accordingly. Any projects that go on within the vicinity of the coastline are planted with knowing that all of those stresses are going to continue and increase. Our coastal area objectives, where actually the Friendship Garden is a great model for climate change. In 1976, it was planted as an azalea garden, and I would say probably by the late 80s, it was a swamp, mostly Phragmites. Over the last couple of years, we received a Parks and Trails grant, and we've been aggressively, you know, redesigning it and reclaiming with native plants. So as part of our objectives, the Friendship Garden is a teaching garden to be a model for future coastal projects. One thing, when you look through historic photos of Bayard, you'll see right up to the old coastline, perfect turf within the gravel paths. It looks like a golf course. I don't know how they did it. But it's actually a danger for us and for our staff now to maintain turf like that. The ground isn't stable, so for many, many different reasons, we're in the process of replacing that strip along the 2 miles of coastline with native coastal plants. So in addition to that, identify the vulnerable areas of a shoreline, identify the funding for repairs and preventive improvements, prioritizing the 3 ponds designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, and obviously what we're discussing tonight, all future plant introductions must be done in accordance with the climate change clause in our master plan. This is the only herbaceous plant that I'm going to show you guys tonight. Does anyone know it?
Kim does.
Do you?
A little bit, yeah.
So I didn't, and I think it's the reason I'm putting it up here because it's a good model for what we're trying to do. It's something that's always been there in the Friendship Garden. We just weren't aware of it. And it's something that's succeeded for many years, and it's I'm sorry, I left an N out there. It's not the Easter salt marsh aster. It is the Eastern salt marsh aster, but it's a good example of something that we're collecting now and we're promoting in that area. We're collecting the seed. But it's really a good example of something that works in the area already. It's an important native plant, and we're encouraging it. Taxodium, the bald cypress, extremely important plant, native to southern swamps as far as its tolerates poorly drained, flooded soils, pretty much anything. And it's always been our go-to conifer along the coastline, and it continues to be. So this is the stickum, which you saw in the earlier picture as well. This is ascendens. Cultivar that we favor right now is Morris, and the pond cypress, and it's tolerant of the same conditions as the bald cypress, but much finer texture. And this plant was originally selected at the Morris Arboretum for its slender habit, and actually its resistance to breaking out with snow loads. It has a little bit of a tighter habit as well. But this is one, when I came to Bayard, it was one of the first, one of my first projects was an underplanting. We planted juncus underneath it, but it was such a smart planting Nelson and Mike Runkle did. They did it along our land bridge, which we're losing the bulkhead. It's falling apart. So they planted it and they staked it into the water with anchors, and it's rooting really well. It's been Joy. How long has that planting been? Like 7 years?
Yeah, I
We finally took the stakes out and everything, but it's because it's rooted, and it's amazing. It's holding the integrity of the soil, so it very ornamentally it works tremendously. You have the fall color of the Morris up against the blue of the juncus in the fall, and there's nothing like it. But it's also a really smart planting and an example of something we want to do more of going into the future. And here's an underrated, native tree. And this is a cultivar of it. I was talking to Larry Fernandez at the last LIAA meeting, and he was telling me that there's one stand left on Long Island, like large stand in the Riverhead area, and I wasn't aware of that. I know at Connecticut they have a couple of large straight species, but the cultivar for us, this is the base of our great lawn. This plant lives underwater. I mean, every storm we have, it's saturated. And it's been that way, this tree has been there, probably the same era, probably like 7 years. But it's a great cultivar. It's Glauca pendula, blue. This would be a good, if up against the pungents, if you were looking for a blue, there's a really blue plant. And funny thing is, I was talking to Fred Saviero last night from Hofstra, and I think, Vinny, you were involved with this as well. Years ago, Michael Durr was doing trials in Georgia for thyroiditis. And he said that he still has them today, and they were also, I guess, selected based on the color. But amazing plant, and I don't see enough of it. If I had a source for the straight species, you know, we would put them up and down the coastline. And so Nyssa sylvatica has always been our go-to deciduous plant on the coastline. Unfortunately, the last big storm we had, Isaiah, the salt spray ripped our tuberoles apart. It was really damaging. So now we're looking further to what will ultimately replace the sylvatica in the future. The cultivars of sylvatica that we favor are Green Gable. It has a uniform habit. Wildfire is actually, I think it's probably the most heat tolerant of the Nyssas, but also the most stunning color. And Zydeco Twist is a new introduction that we have that's a little bizarre. But thinking beyond that, we've recently, maybe 2 years ago, we sourced small plants of Nyssa aquatica, the water tupelo. And it is the zone 6 to 9. It's another, bottomland, floodplain, and it commonly grows in stands with the bald cypress, but extreme high tolerance for flooding and salinity. So this plant is like one of the things that we're really, really looking for. I think I sourced it from one nursery. They're still, I want to say they're less than a foot tall, but we're keeping our eye on them, and hopefully it's going to be a candidate going into the future. And that's all I have for you tonight.